Hey guys, Michael Merula here. I often talk about creation of my unknown world of Ida, what inspired me, shaped me, and how history, movies, game, and art have transformed my life. Every time I upload something on my channel, it has something to do with my world. Today I want to build on that. I believe that everything we do has its roots in the childhood. The things that shape us as children stay with us in the adulthood. While working on my world-building project, a fantasy world set in the ancient and early medieval times, I sometimes got questions like, why do you draw warriors? Or why they look like so historically familiar? Someone even asked, why are they all so blue? Strange but good question, and it has simple answer. Before we dive into that, it got me thinking. It's ironic that this project, which is essentially an artistic book illustrating and narrating the history of my fantasy world, focuses heavily on warfare, battles, and military life. My artworks feature character designs, weapons, and armor, and dramatic battle scenes. Yet in reality, I despise war. To me, it is humanity's cruelest and most senseless hobby. I try to reflect this sentiment in my stories. For example, in The Rise of the Atlanteans or Aquila Conquest, the protagonists are deliberately glorified because the stories are told from their perspective, much like an Asian chronicles account, based and propagandistic. But if you dig deeper into my lore, you will notice that these glorified events and civilizations are all essentially epics of evil acts deserving condemnation. The hero characters are often anti-heroes or outright psychopaths, stopping at nothing to achieve their goals, literally walking over the dead bodies. Most of the time their motivation boiled down to subjugation and domination, or people gaining unchecked power without any real justification. Take Godfrey's rebellion as an example. Baron Godfrey and his Silurian rebels are in the right. They were the original inhabitants of their island, colonized and assimilated into the Umbrian culture under the disguise of the free will, yet their uprising is crushed by the Umbrians and portrayed as villains. Here's a thought experiment. Was Alexander the Great justified in conquering the Persian Empire? Was Hannibal Barca right to invade Italy and devastate it for 12 years? What about Julius Caesar's conquest of Gaul and slaughter of hundreds of thousands of Celts? These events were driven by old grievance. Yes, but the truth is they were often about one man's ambition to gain power and dominate others. Look at the beloved Roman Empire, initially built through defensive wars. Their conquest grew more under the pretext of aiding oppressed nations. Once established, they annexed these nations into their empire. While the Romans brought technological innovations and cultural advancements, it always was at cost. What did the conqueror eradicated civilizations think about it? These living on the borders of the empire, in constant fear of being next, is the same pattern repeated through the history. Bread and games, divide and conquer, give people distractions and they will forget the real issues. So why do I draw warriors in the battles when I despise wars? And why are my characters' design often blue and red? The answers lie into my childhood. Let me summarize by going back to the beginning. In my previous video I talked about how, as a child, I loved Sword and Sandals movie about Asian history and mythology. They were filled with battles, duels, mythological creatures and fantasy adventures. I also loved reading about prehistoric animals and dinosaurs. Honestly, I am surprised I am not designing creatures and monsters instead of warriors. I'm also a big fan of real-time strategy games, which are hugely popular during my childhood. That's where my artistic journey began. I started by drawing warriors and creatures from Heroes of Might and Magic and later moved on to other games and films that inspired me. One of my earliest drawings I remember vividly was a fight between the Cyclops and Sinbad and his crew from the Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, a movie that holds a special place in my heart. This shaped my interest and combined my passions. Significant inspiration was Age of Mythology. You have probably noticed that some of my Atlantean warriors are directly influenced by the game. Atlantis fascinates me because it merges mystery, fantasy, and real prehistory. Perfect space for imagination and inspiration. The story of Belvessus is my take on the legend of Atlantis, blending elements of Gladiator and unexpectedly Sinbad. So why do I design warriors? It's simple. As a child, I loved looking at the illustrations of warriors in historical encyclopedias. I was fascinated by their weapons, armor, how they lived, what they ate, their battle formations, and their role in the wars. I saw them as people, not tools of conflict. My favorite moments were when different cultures clashed. For example, during the Punic Wars, where you had Carthaginians trained by Spartan generals, allied Numidians, Iberian mercenaries, and Celts, all facing Roman legions and their Italian allies. Later, Greeks and Macedonians got involved, leading to the First Macedonian War and eventually conquest of Greece. The mix of diverse cultures and military equipment captivate me. In my fantasy world, warriors are often hybrids of various Asian civilizations. For example, Tarkans are a blend of Scythians and Iberians. Vulterans draw from Etruscans and Mycenaeans. Almarians, mix of Celtic and Germanic influences. Tengri are inspired by Huns and Mongols. In later eras, Umbrians and Silurian rebels combined elements of Normans, Saxons, and British Celts. I also use authentic historical names that reflect their original inspiration. This is why I love Robert E. Howard's Hyborian Age, where Conan the Barbarian stories take place. It's believable world with realistic barbarian tribes, Asian civilization, and functional military designs rooted in history. According to Howard, the Hyborian Age is our Earth just long ago. Similarly, Game of Thrones by George Martin and Lord of the Rings by Tolkien captivate me because despite being fantasy worlds filled with dragons and creatures, the people and cultures feel authentic and historically inspired. Speaking of strategy games, what I love most is building symmetrical cities, training and equipping soldiers and leading them into the battle, experimenting with strategies and tactics I have read about. One of my favorite aspects is watching how soldiers evolve over the time. For example, in Age of Mythology or Age of Empires 4, you start with basic spearmen. As you progress, they gain better equipment, helmets, shields, light armor, and eventually heavier, more ornate gear. This progression also inspired how I design my characters. When I first started working on Godfrey's Rebellion, it was nothing more than concept art project for strategy game. I have always wanted to play where players could customize their soldiers' equipment. Sadly, such a game doesn't exist. Later, it evolved in something bigger, which I now call Godfrey's Rebellion and other stories from Unknown World of Ida. Now, to answer the lingering question, why are my warriors often blue and red? It's simple. In strategy games, players are typically represented by red and blue colors to distinguish between teams. Plus, I love navy blue color and enjoy painting with red. Of course, there's much more to share, but I think I have given you plenty to think about. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments. As always, thank you for watching and for the support of my Patreons. If you enjoyed this, give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more, and check out my older videos where I delve deeper into the history of Unknown World of Ida. I love you all, and see you next time.